Well, let's go ahead. We'll kick things off at this point then. Outside of the business whatsoever, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are as a person.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a husband and a father. My wife, Jennifer, who's actually part of the company, we met in law school. She's a smarter one. I'll put it that way. So, got two kids, Harmon and Madeline. They're 11 and 9. And so when I'm not working, I'm always spending time with them. Outside of that, grew up in Granbury, Texas, which is a little town outside of Dallas, Fort Worth, and went to TCU, ran track and field for TCU. I'm a Horned Frog. I bleed purple, but I did go to SMU. For law school, so the rivalry school. So I made some good graces back up in my family from the SMU historical side of it. And then the rest is history. So outside of that, I really kind of what I like to always fall back on is what I learned not only back then, but what I always go back to is this notion of controlling what you can't control. And I learned that through selling books door to door. With a company called the Southwestern Company. Sold for 3 summers. And I'll tell you what, it's made a huge difference because when things aren't going okay sometimes, which happens, I go back, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to control things I can't control. And it's always worked out pretty well.
For sure. So prior to the business starting, where were you at in life? What were you doing?
Sure. So obviously an attorney by trade, worked at some of the bigger shops, Baker Botts, Fulbright, Jaworski, left there, went in-house and became general counsel of a smaller insurance brokerage shop. So that's where I really learned a lot about property and casualty, health and welfare, benefits, the admin side, what employers were thinking. And then they sold to a company and I said, you know what, I don't really want to do that. And I decided to hang my own shingle. And that was about 8 years ago. Started my own law firm and really got into the entrepreneurial spirit. I kind of realized from selling books in previous history, I'm probably the best boss for me. And so started doing my own law firm. It took off, grew really fast, and then allowed me the opportunity and freedom to learn from other entrepreneurial aspects. Started several other companies. I often tell people I failed successfully from those ventures. I've also been successful in some of those ventures as well, from both the growth, knowledge, and even financial side from that standpoint. But before Workshield started, I was an attorney. I was actually working on a different company, and a client of mine from my law firm emailed me about an article that was in a paper. And she said, hey, is this something we should be thinking about? So I did some research, and it was this a plan that was in place. It was really just a glorified health reimbursement arrangement. And that's what really got me thinking, hey, how do we solve this workplace harassment, this Me Too movement? And how come employers just aren't addressing it? And it's not from a standpoint of, hey, we're not trying to address it. But look, the reality is this. It's been around for a long time. And if you look at shows as Saturday Night Live, Mad Men, Office Space, sometimes people make fun of it. You can even see from a video clip on Toy Story. A lot of people think the innocent movie is Toy Story. Well, in one of their blooper clips, they actually have a scene where they mimic Harvey Weinstein, basically. And so when that's in a movie such as innocent as Toy Story, you kind of have to take a step back and say, hey, this is a real problem. And so I started doing a lot of research, started kind of figuring out, hey, how come this isn't being addressed appropriately? How come we're all of a sudden getting this huge influx of Me Too and workplace harassment, which I'm really excited for because people are feeling more empowered to raise their voice. But at the same time, how do we allow companies to address the issues so they don't have to go to court? They can get resolved reasonably. The employee can be heard, but more importantly, the culture is protected. And so that's really how Workshield started from that standpoint.
Definitely. So obviously, coming from a law background, you understand the legal side of things, what needs to be done, what can be done, how people are protected versus not protected. Walk us through what the business itself actually does on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So let's look at it from what currently exists prior to Workshield and how Workshield is different. Is that okay?
For sure.
Okay. So Today, if you look at any company, probably 99% of the companies out there, when they address the workplace harassment, and it's not just Me Too, it's Title VII, it's age, it's discrimination, it's gender, it's national origin, disability, the whole thing. How do they normally address it? And generally speaking, it goes something like this. Hey, if you feel you've been harassed, if you feel you've been discriminated against, go to HR, go to your supervisor, or hey, call this anonymous hotline, which then guess where that goes back to? It goes back to HR, the supervisor. And that's 99% of the companies out there. And so when you have a stat and the data that says, what's the number one reason why people don't report? It's fear. And it's a fear of retaliation. It's this fear of ridicule. It's this fear of being just, am I going to be heard? Or am I just going to be swept under the rug? And so we looked at that issue and said, okay, well, if that's normally how people go about this process, we have to change that process. And even the EEOC says, look, training doesn't work. Training, if we all take a training seminar today, we're probably going to laugh about it by the end of the day, and we're probably going to forget about it on Monday. And then everybody goes back to their normal behavior. So training, it's good for awareness. It's okay. Now these legislator and Congress and different governments are saying, hey, you got to do training now. But yet it's just a Band-Aid. It's not really solving the problem. So that's the first issue. The second issue is going back to who's actually doing the investigation. Who's actually hearing the employee? Who's actually making sure that, hey, this is going to get resolved promptly and reasonably? Well, if you go back to 99% of the companies, it's HR, it's the supervisor, and 9 times out of 10, it's the supervisor that's the one, or he or she's the one that's doing the harassment or doing the discrimination. So Workshield steps in and we remove all of that. So we have our own call center. It's based out of Seattle. And we also have an online platform so where they can do it on their phone, their tablet, their computer, or if they don't want to do that, they can call into our call center and they'll type it for them. And so instead of going back to HR and the supervisor, it actually comes to Workshield. And so we have Workshield certified attorneys that actually handle the investigation. But here's what's important. We handle it from a conversational tone. So Graham, if I come to you and say, hey, you've been accused of sexual harassment, what'd you do? All of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, time out. Well, do I need an attorney for this? Or all of a sudden you get defensive.
Definitely.
But if I come to you and say, hey, as you know, the company put on Workshield as part of this process, you know what? We understand everybody has a story. So help us understand what happened. All of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, let me tell you what happened. This occurred, why occurred. And the key component of that is once our certified attorneys ask that question, they're quiet. They actually listen. And that's one of the other big problems is people just don't listen. And it all comes down to communication. People are trying to solve this problem through artificial intelligence and through this anonymous hotline component. And yes, that does help in a little bit, but there's got to be this human element. And that's the human element of, I want to talk to somebody. I want to make sure that my voice is heard. I want to make sure that someone actually hears me and understands that. And so when you have these other companies out there that are saying, hey, let's use this AI chatbot, and then they ask the question, hey, do you want us to send this to your employer to investigate? What do you think the answer is? Hell no, right? It's just, it's the same thing, but just a different Band-Aid. It's a different colored Band-Aid where we're actually coming in, we're disrupting the whole process and really saying, hey, look, yes, we do have a call center. Yes, you can do anonymous. But I'll tell you this, out of the past year, we've only had 2 anonymous calls and 2 anonymous reports. It's pretty good. So people are feeling empowered. So instead of going back to HR, the supervisor, it's coming to us. We're doing the investigation. We're making sure we understand what's happening. And because of our hyper-focused, hyper-care model, we actually resolve the whole issue from start to finish, on average, less than 5 days.
Let me go back a little bit, understand a little bit more. So basically in this way, you need to somehow sign a contract with a company. They become a client of yours. Is that
correct? That's correct.
So they will pay you a fee, like monthly, annually?
So we're a per employee per month fee. So if you have 100 employees or 1,000 employees, you pay a per employee per month fee, and that covers everything. That covers all the attorney's time, the certified attorney's time, that covers our services, that covers the onboarding. There's no hidden fees. There's no integration. There's no file fees that need to occur. We really keep it simple. And that means if an employer has one issue or a million issues, as a CFO, as an HR person, as a risk manager, you have a fixed fee. And you know that's all you're going to pay, which is really, really enticing.
Why do you think the employers will be motivated to join your program?
Well, for several reasons. One, Me Too and harassment, it's a big issue. It's the number one issue facing employers today. And the only solutions that are out there that other than Workshield, it's the same thing. It's just it's a different dress. It's a different color. It's, oh, call us and then we'll send it back to you to investigate. But if you compare us to, like, say, a Time's Up. Time's Up is basically saying, hey, come to us and we'll help you sue your employer, right? So you don't really want that. And then you look at some of these other diversity and inclusion companies where they're saying, oh, let us come in and tell you whether or not you're diverse or whether or not you are inclusive. But then when we tell you you're not, how do you fix it? Well, it's not a survey monkey, that's for sure. It's not just doing this analysis. You actually, once you identify the problem, you have to solve it. And we're in the process of solving the problem. We can identify it and solve it. And we're solving it because it all stems with company culture, workplace culture. And if employees feel empowered when they can raise their voice and be heard and know that it's going to be taken seriously and resolved, but we're also protecting the culture and the company as well and allowing that employee voice to be heard, that's why employers like us. So that's number one. Two, they like us because it's a fixed price. That's it. And three, they like us because they're legally protected. So to put it kind of bluntly, if an employer has Workshield on their platform because of some legal rules, they could actually never be held liable for a workplace harassment issue, which is pretty cool. So imagine that. So now if I'm a CEO, CFO, HR, and I don't have Workshield, right now I'm trying to figure out, hey, how many issues do I have in my workplace? You know, because a lot of people will say, oh, we got a great culture. But why do you have a great culture? Well, we have an open door policy and no one comes to us. So we must not have a problem. Well, if you go back to the fear issue, that's why people aren't going to you. So they like us because, one, they're protected. Two, it's a fixed service. It's a fixed fee. Three, we allow the employees a voice to be heard, and it's resolved automatically. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, I still need to understand a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
How do you solve the problem? You still need to go to the employers or go to the employees somehow. You need to, how do you solve the problem?
So the number one issue to solve that we have to address is the fear component, right? And then the second issue is who's actually doing the investigation, who's actually talking to that employee and understanding the issues that are there. So we address the fear because we're removing the employer from the intake, and we're also removing them from the investigation. And so we're actually hearing them and making sure the issue gets resolved. And so a lot of people try to say, well, how do you stop someone from bad behavior? Well, you have to put a reporting mechanism in place, and it can't be a reporting mechanism in place that on the surface may look like it removes the fear, but we all know it just goes back to the employer. Well, with Workshield, it comes to us. We actually do the investigation. We actually take the issue on and make sure it gets resolved. And all of this is a subset of company culture and empowerment of employees. And so to really address this problem, you have to find a fine balance between, hey, employee, you have a voice to be heard, right? And if you allow that voice to be heard, you create this culture of good. You create this culture of respect. You create this culture of decency. And then what turns away from that, or what turns on that, is all of a sudden employees are like, hey, I now know that I can go to my work. I don't have to put up with being harassed. I don't have to put up with discrimination. And when they feel safe in that environment, guess what happens? Productivity goes up, turnover goes down, absenteeism goes down. And so we're really approaching this as a company culture aspect that includes diversity, inclusion, Me Too, discrimination, the whole bit. Does that help answer?
No, but you cannot change the company culture. You still need to go through the CEOs, HRs to change the company culture. But the CEO here is your client. So I see some conflict of interest here.
Well, so there's two ways to approach this. You can either approach it and say, hey, you know, employee, if you don't like your company, come to us and we'll help you sue your company, right? That's what Time's Up is. Would you agree with that statement?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one way. But what is interesting is you have to allow the employer the opportunity to solve the problem, to solve that issue. And if you have someone that's harassing someone, if you have someone that's discriminating against someone, and that employer doesn't know about it, how are they supposed to solve it, right? So the way we solve the problem is we allow that employee's voice to be heard and to be solved internally. Because here's the thing, out of the thousands and thousands of lives that we manage already today, their number one issue that they always come back with is this: thank you for allowing us to be heard. And that's it. And they just want to talk to someone. And a lot of people think with harassment or discrimination, oh, we just got to pay them money. But it's like the role of apology. You know, when you look at litigation and suits and you go back to all these litigation cases and you go like, hey, what could have really solved this before it got to litigation? And their number one response is, I just wanted an apology. I just wanted to make sure that it doesn't happen again and that it gets addressed with me. Because these issues that often get reported in the media and the limelight, it's not like a bottle of wine, these issues are. They don't get better with age. They get worse with age. It's like a soda pop. Like the moment you open that soda and you keep it out for a whole day, guess what? It doesn't taste very good by the end of the day, right? And so it's the same type of issue. You have to address it head on. And then what we're finding in our data is that once the employee feels comfortable, because when it rolls out, yes, the CEO, the CFO, the company, that's our client. But they roll it out because, one, they want to take a stand. Harassment is not going to be allowed in our workplace. Discrimination is not going to be allowed in our workplace. And we're going to carry this sword that we're going to protect our employees because they're our number one asset. And we don't put up with harassment or discrimination. And in fact, we don't put up with it that we're going to give you a service that allows you to raise your hand, to raise your voice, to tell us what's going on. And in fact, because so many people don't trust HR and they don't trust the company to raise that issue because of fear, we're going to have them investigate it. And we're going to make sure that it gets resolved. And that's what they're there for. We often call it the police effect. So whenever we roll out to a new client, generally what happens, a lot of people are concerned, oh, well, geez, Jared or Workshield, if we roll this out, the floodgates are going to open. Well, if it does happen, you've had a lot of issues that you didn't know about. But what we're seeing over the past 17, 18 months is that when a client onboards our platform, there's this chilling effect. So when you drive home today, if I say, hey, when you go under that bridge, there's a police officer on the other side, what are you going to do?
Slow it down, right?
You're going to slow it down. Everybody does. But then if you have a heavy foot, you're going to speed back up. And then you may forget, oh, there's another cop over there. There's another police officer over there. It's the same thing here. When it rolls out, look, we give everybody ID cards to say, hey, just like a medical ID card, there's employee welcome letters. There's a whole rollout process that we do. And when it does happen, now all of a sudden, when that person forgets that that police is there or that that tool is there for that employee to speak up, all of a sudden, hey, an issue arises, it gets investigated, it's resolved and handled less than 5 days on average. Everyone's sitting there going like, whoa, wow, they are taking a stand. They're not going to allow this, and they're going to make sure this is resolved. And so that's how we're solving this problem. Look, you don't climb a mountain by jumping to the top. You don't run a marathon by running a sprint, right? And it's these little bitty steps that take time, right? And the first step that an employer has to ask themselves is, one, do we want to protect our employees? Yes or no? Generally, most people will say yes. And then two, how do we protect them? Well, you can't just say, call this anonymous hotline. You can't just say, here's training. You have to make sure there's a solution in place that actually allows them to raise their voice and action is taken. And so when you have that process in place, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we're changing the culture. We're changing our dynamic. We're allowing employees to feel safe. And some employers already have a great culture, but they want to protect it because you never know of who that bad hire is or that bad actor is. And look, people make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And sometimes someone says something derogatory or inappropriate. Well, what if they don't address it right then? All of a sudden, is that okay to keep saying it? Well, with Workshield, someone can actually raise their voice. We're going to handle it and make sure it's addressed right away. So does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I think I understand some. How did you get your first client?
Knocking on doors, basically. So it was pretty interesting. When I came up with the concept, I was actually in Chicago and actually had a client in my law firm. And by the way, my law firm is not the one that does all the investigation. We partner with the firm that has offices from New York to California. So I was in Chicago speaking with the client, and I said, "Hey, I got this idea, company called Workshield. This is the model." And I gave him all the data. Like, look, 99% of the companies have used this anonymous hotline, and he came back and said, "Well, that's what we have." And I was like, "Well, do you feel like it works?" And he goes, "No." And I was like, "Well, what if I could offer you a different solution? And oh, by the way, allow your employees to be heard. We remove you from actually doing the investigation. Now, you'll always know and understand what's happening, and you'll have the opportunity to finalize that resolution." And he came back and said, "I like it. There's nothing like this in the market. I want it." And so I was like, "Oh, okay. Are you saying that because you're my friend or because we've known each other for 7 years?" So that was on January 30th of 2018. And so the next night I had another dinner in Chicago with another friend of mine who owns an insurance agency, told him and his brother the idea as well. And they both said, "This is brilliant. Like, there's nothing like this in the marketplace." And so I flew home the next day, told Jennifer, my wife, "Hey, we're starting this company together. You're a co-founder. I'm a founder as well." And she goes, "Whoa, wait, time out." I was like, "Look, it's going to be great." So we spent about 6 months building the platform. And I went back to those two individuals and said, "Hey, here it is." And they said, "Sign me up." And then from there, it just started growing through word of mouth and then reaching out to people I knew in the health and welfare industry and clients and saying, "Hey, I got a new service. It's a disruptor in how employers handle this. What do you think?" And then when they found out how it works, it's pretty simple. And look, our PEPM, we charge $2 to $4 per employee per month. And that includes all the attorney's time. Think about that. So you have a 100 life group, you're going to pay $200 to $400 a month to protect your culture, to allow your employees a voice to be heard, and it's going to get resolved. I mean, you spend more on that going out to dinner with a client, right? And it's the same with bigger companies. They want to feel protected. And as companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, they don't know what's happening in their own company. So does that help you?
Yeah, at this point, for your largest client, how many employees does it have?
So I'll tell you this, our smallest client is 17 employee lives. And our largest client, we have one, there'll be over 20,000 employee lives. So that we're onboarding currently. And so it's a big range, right? Because a lot of people say, "What's your ideal client?" Well, it's any employer. I would say under 15 lives, probably not. But our smallest one's 17. We have some that are 75, 50, 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200, 2,000, 5,500 live groups. We have 8,000. I mean, so it just varies. And it really, what we often say is, yes, every employer can be a client per se, but it's really those employers who want to hit this issue head on. They want to protect their employees. They want to protect their culture. They want to make sure these issues get addressed. And they don't end up in the EEOC or in the spotlight or in litigation, because that's really what happens is if they don't address it head on. Because people get fed up and tired and they're like, "I'm done with this company. I'm just going to go sue them. I'm going to go to the EEOC. I'm going to go to the Workforce Commission." And so and generally you have to look at it from characteristics. So the three industries that are hit the hardest by the Me Too in harassment and discrimination, it's restaurant, retail, and hospitality. And so we already have several restaurants, retail, hospitality type groups. We have oil and gas. We have professional services. We have insurance. We have automotive dealers, construction, manufacturing, technology. It varies across every industry and every employer. And it really comes down to, hey, the question is this: if I'm an employer and I know Me Too and discrimination and culture and diversity and inclusion is a big issue, how do I want to protect my culture? How do I want to protect my employees? That is not the same that has been done over the past 100 years, because it's not working. We see that in today. Look at the headlines every week. When they ask themselves that question, if they say, hey, I want to protect them, I want to make sure the culture is protected, I want to give them a voice to be heard, I want to make sure the company is protected as well, that's our client.
How many employees do you have now?
So we have 7 employees at Workshield. We've been growing fast. I feel like we're part of that. What is it? The FedEx montage, or where, you're like, oh, here's a cup of tomato soup, and the montage happens, and all of a sudden you're in a big store selling tomato soup to everybody. I feel like that a little bit. I wake up every morning excited to come to the office to work with our employees and our partners, and even our attorney partners that we have as well, and make sure every day is a new day, and we're addressing issues on a daily basis, and we're impacting thousands and thousands and thousands of employee lives. And to me, that's fun. That's a lot of fun, and it's worthwhile, and it's our mission to protect that culture for every company out there. And so it's been fun. We got 7 employees. We're growing as well, and we probably will be, say, 10 or 11 by the end of the first quarter as well, if not more. But it's fun. We're having a great time.
Is it profitable now as a company?
So, I would say yes. I mean, we have revenue, we have clients. Obviously, adding more employee, you kind of get a little bit in the black or red, depending on where it is, but and how many people we're adding on. But we should be very well, do very well with our numbers.
So, on the note of doing well, obviously, this new venture for you hasn't been in existence for a huge period of time, but over this period, you've seen some pretty big growth, taken on a lot of new clients. Were there any big breakthroughs along the way that really stood out for you?
When we first started, I often say, if you're not learning, and people, sometimes, let me back up. Sometimes I feel like people don't like saying you're a startup. Like, oh, I feel like I should be an experienced company. Well, in our view, you should always think of yourself as a startup, because you're always learning. You're always trying to grow. You're always trying to make sure your product is better and your message. And so we constantly drill down on our message. Are we doing the right message? Are we saying the right things? Are we communicating effectively? And so kind of the breakthrough moment was we realized, hey, we're getting these clients on. And then we started saying, okay, what's our mission? What's our value? Let's tweak our message down effectively. And then who are we talking to? CFOs? Are we talking to risk managers? Are we talking to HR? Are we talking to CEOs? And so I think once we kind of realized there's this different messaging aspect, depending on who our audience is, that really projected our growth. I think also it's just word of mouth. It's being known out there in the marketplace. A lot of people may not know about us, but what was interesting is we got a request from a company in DC and another one in Seattle, or not Seattle, but over in Oregon and Washington, asking for a proposal. And I had no idea how they came from. And so they came into our website, they saw what we were doing and asked for a proposal. And so it's been interesting to gain clients in that manner. And it's just making sure we're out there and letting employers know, like, hey, we're here to help you, and we're here to help your employees as well. So I think that's probably the big breakthrough, and just kind of that exposure that's out there, and understanding, and just making people aware. And that's what we can control. We can't control if someone says yes or no. And we kind of look at it as like, hey, I just want to know, are you a yes or a no? If you're a no, thank you. If you're a yes, thank you so much. So.
For sure. And on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, what are we talking for risk making this thing happen?
So risk from what perspective? Can you clarify a little bit on that?
So obviously you were well established, kind of in the law firm, had all that going for you. Changing focus. I'm assuming the law firm's still going at this point, but
Yeah.
kicking this off, were there risks to you personally, financially, on the family side of things, anything like that?
Well, I think anybody who's an entrepreneur is always risking something. And so you're risking your time with your kids, you're risking your time with your wife or spouse or significant other. It's also a financial risk. Look, we kind of went all in on this one because we gained a lot of traction. And yes, my law firm is still there and it's still got a couple of clients on there, but that's being managed by other people. And so from that standpoint, and that's okay. So the risk side is, you call your friends and you call your buddies that to help you grow the company, and the risk side is also you're taking investor dollars, and so there's always risk when you do that. And I look at this as there's a big side to this, and I want to not only grow it for my family but for everybody involved in the company, for Todd, my partner, for Zach, who's in sales, for Megan, who's on account management, for my wife, Jen, who's also involved in the company and helping out, and for our CFO and all of our investors and even our advisory board members. So, there's risk, and that's part of being the CEO and entrepreneur. And I think it's something that you constantly are thinking about, but you can't dwell on it. So you have to, I approach it from a good standpoint and acknowledge it. And it goes back to controlling what you can control. And if we focus on that, I firmly believe you will always be in a better situation and make yourself better, make your company better by controlling what you can control. And look, I can't control who says yes. I can't control who says no, but I can control what I tell them. I can control that, hey, here's what we do. Let me tell you about it. What do you think? And some people say yes and some people say no, and that's okay. So, but outside of that, the risk is, look, if I fail, a lot of people think failure is not good. Look, I failed before, but it's a matter, do you get back up? Do you learn from your mistakes? And look, we're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And it's a matter of how quickly can you learn from that mistake? How quickly can you get back up? And how quickly can you apply the principles that you learn to your work going forward? And so that's the way I approach that risk side of it. And I'm still learning. That's for sure.
Definitely. On the note of those mistakes, since I got you talking about them,
Yeah.
Any specific examples that stand out to you that you guys have really grown from?
Two parts of it. Let's talk about a little bit of mistakes that I learned from prior companies. In other ventures that I've been in, we've taken investor dollars, but we've taken investor dollars from Joe Blow down the street who had, couldn't really do anything for the company. Or you took money from the wrong type of person who really isn't the right investor to have. And so in learning from those mistakes and coming forward to Workshield, when we started our capital raise, we said, look, we're going to find the right money. Sometimes people think any type of money is good money. Well, not really. I don't believe in that. I believe you have to find the right investor, the right money to help grow the company, who can also help spread the word, who can also give you insight and advice. And so that's kind of the one mistake that I learned before that we're taking that lesson learned going forward. The other one also is when we started it, I often feel like people get really greedy, and that's with, no, I want 52% equity versus 58% or 48% equity. And we have a mantra here that, hey, we're always going to be fair. Fair is great. And so once greed steps into any company, I think people start seeing things unravel. And that's okay. Some people choose that, but we want to be fair. And we've had this whole issue where some people come in like, well, Jared, why did you do that? I was like, because it was fair. I'm like, well, it would have been better for you. And I'm like, okay, let's take that. It would have been better for me, but it would have been better for the company. We have to be fair about this whole process. And, outside of that, I often find myself, and everybody knows this, surround yourself with people a lot smarter than you are. And that was my goal. So Todd, who's our CIO, COO, he's super smart. 6 US patents to his name. I mean, knows stuff inside and out that is amazing. And he makes everyone else around him smart as well. And then just with our advisory group that we have on board, look, we have, one of the managing partners of a big law firm, Tim Powers. He's the managing partner at Haynes & Boone. He's been a mentor to me for 19 plus years. And it's asking him to join because I can call him and he's going to tell me what I need to know, not what I want to know, right? And it's making sure that advisory board, I can call them and ask them, hey, we're thinking about this. Tell me your thoughts. Or, for example, Jennifer Sines, who's the chief marketing officer for Frito-Lay. I can call her and say, hey, we're thinking about this marketing side aspect. What are your thoughts on this? Tell us what you see out there from a marketing standpoint. Do you see value in if we approach it this way or that way? Or it's, like Laurel Legler or Nami. Laurel's at a company called Molo Solutions. Nami's at Google. Calling Nami and saying, hey, Nami, look, we worked together in the past. Tell me what you're seeing from an HR perspective. How do we want to communicate with HR? And same with Laurel, and tell us what you're seeing out there. What's, hey, we want to approach it this way. What are your thoughts? And making sure those individuals that are on your team, one, you're going to respect their advice, right? Doesn't mean you have to take it, but you're going to respect it. And you also don't want yes people. You want people to challenge you and ask you like, okay, well, tell us your thoughts about that. And you could do that in a great way, right? You don't have to, some people think challenging is more about being on opposite sides of the table. I look at it as, hey, we're all on this thing together. We're all on the same side of the table. Let's just figure it out. Let's find a solution. And so that's where I think some of the mistakes I've made in the past were employing those lessons learned in Workshield from that perspective. Does that help answer your question?
For sure.
Okay.
Let's go back a little bit. You mentioned about raising capital.
Mm-hmm.
Did you raised capital for Workshield too, right?
Correct. So we're almost finished with our raising capital. We're raising, I can't tell the number, but we're raising a pretty good amount on a great valuation, a fair valuation, I would say that. And so it's been interesting. And so a lot of people sometimes want to come in, but it's not the right money. And so we say, no, we're not making that mistake. So it's been an exciting process. I think anyone would tell you it always takes longer than expected. So, and any type of capital raise or funding. So, but yeah, so we're excited about that and able to use that capital to grow bigger, to grow faster, to hire more employees, more account managers, more salespeople, increase our technology platform and presence, and go from there.
Definitely. At this point in time, in your position as the founder, the CEO, what are the biggest perks of doing what you do?
Oh, perks. Look, it's being able to work with great people. And that's really it. One of the interesting challenges that I thought would be a challenge is my wife and I working together, right? She's an attorney as well, practiced at some big law firms, was in career services, assistant dean of career services at Southern Methodist University, the law school there, and hasn't worked for a while. And, I often thought that would be a challenge. And she would say the same thing too, but it's been a lot of fun. And so, and I realized automatically one day I was out on a sales trip and I called her and I just wanted to talk to her, right? Just not about work, just her. And yet she was telling me like, hey, what about this idea for Workshield? And what about this? And what about that? And blah, blah, blah. And finally I had to say, hey, time out. I just want to talk to you. So it was kind of interesting to see that engagement. And so that's been fun and interesting from a perk because I can see her can walk 4 doors down and say, hey, how's your day going? And then go grab lunch together and be able to do that. But outside of that, it's working with great people and working with great companies and helping them out. I think that's the biggest perk. The other perk of it too is being able to think of different ideas from the vision standpoint and where we're headed and where do we need to be 6 months from now or 3 months from now, and what are some new solutions that we can provide, and what are some of these aspects that we can bolt on to our platform to even have a bigger presence. And look, one of the things we're doing with our employers, we're making sure employers are Workshield certified. So think about this: you walk into a company and they see your badge, a plaque that says you're Workshield certified. What does that do from a recruiting standpoint for that company? They're like, oh, what does that mean? Hey, we have zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination, and we're going to make sure your voice is heard. Well, it's pretty amazing, right? It's pretty neat. And so it's being able to just have this impact on a lot of lives, on a lot of employees, and companies. I mean, I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. It's just, that's the best perk of being the founder and being the CEO. And yes, look, it's not easy. But if anything was easy, everybody would do it. And it's a hard job, and that I welcome that. But at the same time, I get to work with great people.
Definitely. Once again, I got to ask, just because I like to go back and forth between the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
Anything about the position you don't like, or working in the company on a daily basis you wish you could change?
Well, the buck stops with you, right? And sometimes you can grapple with what decision you want to make or what direction you want to go to. And I think some people can approach that. It's not fun from that standpoint because everyone's looking at you saying, hey, how do you want to approach this? How do you want to take this issue on? Or, hey, how do you want to expand? Do you want to grow over here or over here? And they're looking for your advice. And you're the leader. You're the CEO. You're the founder. You're the vision. And sometimes I think some people can let that just total, what's the right word? Take that person down and get them into a dump almost. And you have to approach it of like, hey, this is an awesome responsibility. And if you take it from that standpoint and the opportunity to have tough conversations and to be able to put your whole heart into that company and know that, hey, it's okay. Mistakes are going to happen, but how do we learn from them? But I think kind of the hardest part, maybe the one that some people don't like, is everything stops with you. And look, if you have to fire somebody, someone else isn't doing it, you're doing it, right? If you have to hire somebody, you have to sign off on it. And are you hiring the right person or the wrong person? And it's okay if you're the wrong person. You just got to make sure you take quick action and you learn from it. But everyone looks to you, and that's a plus and a minus. But I look at the minus side of that. It's more of an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow from an individual. And look, from a Workshield standpoint, I've already seen myself grow from who I was 6 months ago to who I was 3 months ago to definitely when we started the company in February of 2018. And to me, that's fun. And I'm seeing that in a daily life and a family life and my friendships and the colleagues that we work with. We're having better communication. We're having better conversations. We're having more direct. You know, Brene Brown often says that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And here we want to be clear in everything that we do. And that's the kind way to go. And I think we just remember that process. And as a CEO or any founder or any CEO, that's great. Does that help answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we've talked about the business in its current state, success it's had so far. Looking towards the future, what are you most excited about that's coming up?
Well, we got a big Q1 coming up. We're really excited about that from that perspective. We're excited to hit 2020. We have a lot of momentum going into the new year for 2020. And more importantly, every day that passes, we're gaining more insight and more data. And if you think about data right now, if you try to piece together, hey, you know, what are the general statistics of workplace harassment, of discrimination? It's all piecemealed. You got to pull it together. There's no central hub that really can say, hey, from an employer perspective or an industry perspective, or even a vertical perspective, here is what you're typically going to see. Well, we're becoming that data source. And we can now start looking at the data and saying, hey, you're in this industry, you're in this vertical, you have this many employees. We're actually starting to see how many incidences are there. And we're also able to take the data that they know beforehand versus the data that we have. And we're already showing a 60 to 70% reduction in incident rates within a company. So think about that. If you're a company of 1,000 employees, and generally speaking, on a national average basis, that based on the data that we put together, there's about a 4 to 5% incident report rate. So for every 1,000 lives, there's 40 or 50 issues that a company has to deal with. So if you reduce that down by 60 to 70%, what do you think that does to culture? We solve that problem. That's what it means. It also allows us to give data and to look at data and to help the employer say, hey, here's what we're hearing. Here's some issues that you're having, or hey, here's some things that you could do to create a better culture. And then all of a sudden we can now take that data and say, hey, within this industry or within that industry or within this vertical, or hey, with employers with 10 different locations or 5 different locations, or based on power levels, here's what everything you're going to see. That's really cool. And, because everybody talks about data's king. Well, we're getting that data. And it's neat to be able to allow the employers to take action on that data so they can create that better culture, that better environment for their employees.
Definitely. And staying on the future trend, do you see any threats or risk factors or competitors emerging in the future?
Yeah, so good question. When we think about, look, we're going to get competitors, and that's great. I think it brings more credibility to what we're doing. A lot of people get scared when someone enters the marketplace, and we think of it as, hey, it's an opportunity. It's a great opportunity because it shows what we can do different. It also shows how we're different, and we can learn from that. But from a competitor standpoint right now, I think we're so far ahead and have first mover advantage because no one really does what we do. There's a lot of companies out there that say, hey, tune into our AI chatbot or artificial intelligence or call our call center and we'll do the intake of that issue. But then what's their question they ask after that? Hey, do you want us to send this to your employer to investigate? And when they ask that question, or it goes back to the employer, then are you really solving the problem? Our answer is no, you're absolutely not. Yes, you may be trying to remove that fear, which is a great cause, but are you really addressing the problem? No. And so from a competitor standpoint, you have that side of the equation. The other equation is, look, who are our competitors on the investigation side? Well, it's lawyers, right? It's law firms. Well, they charge $500 or $600 an hour. And so employers now are sitting there going like, geez, we have all these issues. Do we really want to pay $500 or $600 an hour, or can I pay $2 or $4? What do you think the answer is going to be?
That $2 or $4 is sounding pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, we don't have a perverse incentive. So if you're an employer and you go out to your outside counsel that you're probably going to use in any litigation, yes, they're going to help you solve it. But guess what? If it goes to litigation, they just make more money, right? So we're really commoditizing this legal market, the legal industry. We took an HMO approach, put a fixed capitated rate on that service and applied it to the legal industry and the Me Too movement and the discrimination and diversity inclusion. And no one else can do that. We figured it out. That doesn't mean someone else isn't going to figure it out. We'll get competitors, and that's great. But I think right now we're so far ahead of any competitor that's out there against us that, look, we're happy that someone comes in that's going to make us stronger and make us better. So, so other than that, I think that's our risk. Our competitors, if you want to call them competitors at that point, it's more of what are the other options, and the question becomes, do they actually solve the problem? I think Workshield is really the only solution out there that really solves this Me Too, this discrimination, this diversity, this inclusion issue that some people are taking, hey, let's do surveys. Let us come in and, you can have us as a consultant, but are they really doing anything? No, they're telling you what's wrong, but how are you going to fix it? And we're able to solve it.
For sure. So obviously we're in the fledgling state. It's your baby at this point in time, and we'll call it more or less pioneering a new way to do things, right? come 5, 10, 20, however long it may be down the road, would you ever sell the company?
Yes, I would. I think, is this a legacy company for my kids and down the road? I can't answer that question. I don't think it's going to be. It could be. Look, we're going to have a lot of data. We're going to have a lot of lives that we're managing. We look at this like an investor will look at their portfolio. How many assets? What's your assets under management? We look at it as lives under management, because the more lives we get, the more data we're able to see, the more lives we're able to impact employers. So would we ever sell? Yeah, absolutely. I think any founder or CEO that says, no, I never want to sell, they're not telling you the whole truth. Look, yeah, it's always an option. And I think people often say there's always a number. And I think it comes back to greed and being fair. And with our case, and I've told everybody that's involved in the company, hey, if we ever get an offer, or when we do, we're going to do what's fair for the company and what's fair for everybody. It's not just about me. It's not just about my family. It's about everyone that we impact. It's about the employees and what's fair and what's good. Because I often say, we tell employers, hey, let's create this culture of good. Let's create this culture of common decency, of fairness. Well, we'd kind of be living a lie if we didn't take that same approach. And so that's how we approach it. And so, could it be sooner or rather than later? I don't know. But man, the future is bright. I'll tell you that. And it's exciting.
Absolutely. And just out of curiosity, you're very much a people-based business, right? It revolves around the people, protecting the people, giving them a voice. You've also talked a lot about the data coming in. Could you ever see a transition to the data side of things, as data being, such a powerful force in the industry at this point?
Yeah, there's that's one of the vision sides of it. Look, we want to be the common name for, hey, you go into a building and you see the LEED, symbol. Are they LEED certified? We want to be the common name out there. Hey, is that company Workshield certified? Right. And it's almost as a verb, almost, oh, that's a Workshield company. That's a safe place to go work. And I think having that data allows you to become that aspect. And look, at some point, people are going to want to know, hey, with this company out here, with that company over there, what's the data say about discrimination issues, about harassment issues? We're going to have EPLI carriers and E&O and D&O carriers and insurance companies coming to us saying, hey, we need to know your data because we can't underwrite this company without your data. And eventually the carriers are going to start saying, hey, we'll write your E&O and D&O and E&O policy, but you got to have Workshield on. You got to be Workshield certified. And so, because what we're seeing is, imagine you're a carrier and you say, hey, look, we can give you a premium. And by the way, without Workshield, the EPLI premiums are increasing 8-10% every year. Why? Because of Me Too, because of discrimination. But if now you can go to that carrier and say, hey, we have the data, and this employer has actually reduced their amount of incidences, they need a premium break. They need a deductible break. Hey, you can lower their deductible and their premium, and you as a company can still make money, and the company's still protected. So I think that data absolutely is there. It's part of our process. It's a part of our roadmap as a company and as a growth standpoint. I just think we're going to be the first ones that'll be able to culminate that data and partner with other vendors as well. When they get their data, they can submit it to us and we'll put it in our data in our platform from there.
For sure. So let's go ahead. We'll go kind of full wrap back to the beginning at this point.
Yes.
Looking on the entrepreneurial side of things, for somebody that wants to start a business or really get their name out there into an industry, what would be your biggest points of advice?
Good question. I'll ask that same question to me because I started some other companies before. Maybe they didn't take off as fast. And so I was like, what was the number one thing, at least for me in this market right here? And this doesn't necessarily apply to every single entrepreneur, or every single person that's trying to be an entrepreneur or trying to start a company. I think it's awareness, right? One, you have to execute. That's always a given. You have to execute on what you say you can do. That's a given. So taking the givens out of it and you do what you say you're going to do, it's awareness. So in our early stages, look, I mean, I'm sitting there, my Jen, my wife doesn't work. I'm the only breadwinner. I'm starting this company. We just launched it. We're out in the marketplace. We have a few clients. And I'm like, how do I grow the company faster than what I can by myself? And we had to make a tough decision. We hired a PR firm, right? And they're not cheap, by the way. And so it kind of came down like, hey, this was kind of a big moment. And look, we interviewed 7 different PR firms. We selected down the final 3 and did some final interviews and found one that's really, really awesome. And they got our vision, they got our idea. And it was an expensive part of it, because part of it is like, hey, do I pay the mortgage or do I pay the PR firm? Right. And, that's the kind of things we're dealing with as an entrepreneur. And so I think sometimes if you have an idea, go at it, go for it. But then just make sure people know that you're out there and that you can help solve the problem. And, sometimes people ask me all the time, well, geez, how did you do it? Like what made you decide to do it? And, I listen to a lot of different podcasts and people say, were you lucky or did you hit the right timing? And I often say, look, if you have an idea, don't waste it, right? If you think it can work, go beta test it, go ask your colleagues and friends that are going to tell you what you need to know, not what you want to know. Do they like it or not? And then if it works, jump on it, because you don't want to wait 6 months and then look back and say, man, I wish I would have done that because now someone else already did it. And so I think you have to oftentimes go with your gut instinct when you make some of those decisions. And that's really what happened with Workshield. Thought about it, asked a couple of people, and I was like, all right, we're doing it. And don't look back. Don't second guess yourself. Learn from your mistakes, but don't second guess yourself. Just go with your gut.
Absolutely. And on those days when things start getting real heavy, you got all those tough decisions falling on you. Is there any people, quotes, books, anything like that you look for inspiration?
Yes and no. So I have a few very close friends of mine. Look, I'm a people person. I have a lot of friends, but also have a few very, very close friends. I also have a twin brother. I can call my twin brother at any time. He's going to pick up the phone and I'll talk to him, right? And whether it's good or bad, he's going to tell me what I need to know. He's very straightforward like that. Obviously my wife's my best friend. It's kind of hard, interesting because she's in the company, and sometimes I'm like, I need to talk to someone else. But I really fall back on that notion I learned when I was 19 years old: control what you can control. And oftentimes when you face those kind of hard moments and you feel like, hey, I'm down in the dumps, like what's going on? I don't understand. Why is this happening? And you kind of take an objective, like look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, how did I get here? Was I trying to control things that I couldn't control? And oftentimes that answer is yes when you end up there. Now look, shit happens, right? Things are going to happen to you. And it's how you get back up. It's how you, rise up above with those failures. And I'm going to get knocked down. I may get knocked down tomorrow, but I'm going to get back up again. That's for sure. And so I think in those moments, you got to have some key people that you trust. You got to have a small circle and say, hey, I need to come and talk to you. I have this issue. Outside of that, here lately, I've been listening to Brene Brown. Everybody knows who she is, right? Daring to Lead. And I have it on audiobook. I have the book right here on my desk. So I refer to it all the time. And man, she's awesome. She gives a lot of insight. And when you have those rumbling moments, and you have those vulnerability moments, and be able to lead from that perspective, sometimes you can find the easiest thing to do is kind of go back in there. And it's pretty interesting. There's actually a deal that she talks about, and I'll read it to you because I have it marked. And it talks about being in the arena, right? Are you familiar with that? So I'll read it to you. And it goes, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and who comes up short again and again, who at the best knows at the end of the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. And so I get choked up because a lot of times when you read that, it reminds you of like, hey, you're the one in the arena. No one else is there. You decided to get into that arena, and people can point fingers all the time. And when they point at you, you got to ask yourself, hey, are they in the arena? Are they just in the stadium? They're not in the arena down there with you. And sometimes you have to remember that. And that's one I often read quite a bit and just say, hey, look, that's okay. I'm daring greatly. And if I fail, I fail. But at least I'm in the arena trying to do some great things.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
So, as far as the interview goes, that'll kind of wrap up the majority of the questions that we have.
Right.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah.
It was a great time. Really loved the chat. Absolutely great story to tell for our audience.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all your time. And if there's any other questions I can answer or you need some other feedback on, look, you got my email, you got my cell phone and text. And look, we're all in the arena together. So let's make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jared.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.